The screech of a suitcase dragging across the polished floor of first class was abruptly silenced by a cold voice. "Sorry, but this seat isn't yours." The air froze. Among rows of gleaming Italian leather seats, Christopher Hale stopped short, his gaze locked on the blonde woman, neatly settled in seat 2A. His seat. The crumpled boarding pass in his hand displayed the number clearly, yet Madeline Crawford, her phone glowing with images of million-dollar mansions, never looked up. Only a syrupy voice, dripping with contempt, floated out. "You can find another place. I'm already sitting here." Christopher did not answer immediately. 3 exhausting days of back-to-back meetings in New York weighed on his shoulders, yet deep in his dark eyes a spark still burned. A black hoodie, plain jeans, expensive sneakers disguised as ordinary. The deliberate choice to look like just another passenger. He was tired of suits and ties, but that choice now gave this woman the courage to deny his very existence. With a slow, restrained breath, Christopher lowered his voice, calm but unyielding. "This is seat 2A, and it belongs to me." Only then did Madeline lift her gaze. Her icy blue eyes scanned him like an intruder, and a smirk curled across her lips, equal parts challenge and mockery. "The system must have made a mistake. I'm a platinum member of Aerosky. You'll surely be placed somewhere more appropriate." The word appropriate cut like a knife. Curiosity spread through the cabin. Some passengers stole glances, others pretended to stare at their screens, unwilling to get involved. Inside Christopher, old memories resurfaced. His years at Harvard in boardrooms full of white faces, the probing eyes that made him feel out of place. Once again, prejudice had found him, here in a seat he had paid for, with a fare worth more than a flight attendant's monthly salary. He glanced at his watch, a Philippe Patek hidden beneath his sleeve, not to check the time, but to steady his breathing. In the backpack lay contracts capable of shifting an entire industry. Yet to Madeline, all that mattered was his skin and his clothes. "Ma'am, I need you to check your boarding pass again," Christopher said, his tone lower, but the fire beneath it unmistakable. Madeline let out a short laugh, dry and cutting through the luxury around them. "My friend, do you know where you are? This is first class. People don't wear hoodies and sneakers here." Every word struck like a slap. Rage swelled inside Christopher, but he restrained it. This was not the first time he had faced disdain. The difference was that no one in this cabin knew he was not just another passenger. 3 years earlier, through a series of complex mergers, Christopher had become the controlling shareholder of Aerosky Airways. The seat Madeline clung to literally belonged to him. First class had become a stage, and now every eye was on it, an audience awaiting the next act. Some younger passengers raised their phones, the faint clicks of cameras and the glow of screens reflecting on tense faces. Christopher leaned forward, his voice deepening, carrying a weight that could not be ignored. "I am not mistaken. This is my seat, and I will sit in it." The words made Madeline flinch, the smug smile faltering for the first time. But quickly she countered, "I've flown with Aerosky for 12 years. I know how things work. Someone like you could never keep this seat." A ripple of whispers spread across the cabin, small waves rolling through the silence. What began as a dispute over a seat was now a spectacle, exposing prejudice and power. In that instant, Christopher knew this flight would not be ordinary. This would be a storm. He was no longer the weary man searching for a place to sit. He was about to become the center of a costly lesson for anyone who thought power was tied only to a luxury ticket and pale skin. And in the murmurs of first class, he allowed himself a cold smile. "Mrs. Crawford, you've just chosen the wrong man to challenge." The sound of high heels tapped against the thick carpet, followed by a voice polished to perfection. "What seems to be the issue here?" All eyes turned to the woman in a neatly tailored navy uniform. Lena Park, the chief flight attendant just past 20 to 9, stepped forward with a practiced smile, though in the corners of her eyes, Christopher saw impatience and doubt. Madeline immediately straightened, her voice loud and theatrical, as if she had been waiting for this moment. "Thank you for coming. I am a Platinum member. I have been sitting here from the start, but this passenger insists that seat 2A is his." The words, "this passenger," spread like a stain, dripping with disdain. Lena turned to Christopher, her smile softening. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass, please?" Christopher calmly handed over the crumpled ticket. Lena glanced down, the number 2A printed clearly. She hesitated, then lifted her gaze with a flicker of unease. The pause was enough for whispers to ripple through first class, for a few phones to rise higher, camera flashes quietly flickering. "Yes, this is indeed your seat, Mr. Hale." She stopped, drew a quick breath, then added, "However, Mrs. Crawford is one of our long-standing loyal customers. We can arrange another seat for you, perhaps 3C. It is very spacious and comfortable." The words carried the weight of a forced concession. In Christopher's ears, a dull roar surged like a storm. He had sat through enough negotiations with major corporations to recognize the so-called safe solution, sacrificing the one seen as weaker to appease the one assumed to hold power. He did not erupt with anger. Instead, a deep weariness seeped into his nerves, the exhaustion of constantly being asked to prove he was worthy of what was already his. "Park," he said slowly, each word falling heavy into the air. "Are you suggesting that I give up the seat I paid for, simply to satisfy another passenger's request?" Lena blinked, her professional smile tightening on her lips. Madeline cut in sharply. "Exactly. You see, even the flight attendant understands. A Platinum member like me deserves comfort. You are just a passerby." The words "a passerby" fell like shards of ice. Behind them, a few passengers shifted uneasily. A middle-aged man shook his head. An elderly couple exchanged a knowing glance, their eyes reflecting memories of having lived through this themselves. In the third row, a woman with dark hair and a press badge quietly raised her phone, beginning to record. Christopher drew a steady breath. His heartbeat thundered in his chest, yet his voice was calm, still as a lake. "I appreciate the effort to keep the peace, but fairness cannot be sacrificed for convenience. I will sit in the seat that is mine." First class trembled. The answer, short and firm, shattered the habit of silence so many had grown accustomed to. Madeline laughed shrilly, her tone straining to cover her unease. "How absurd. You think this seat is yours just because of a printed slip of paper. This is first class. This is our world." Christopher lifted his eyes, meeting the stares of those watching him. Some carried encouragement, some curiosity, others silent anticipation. Would he back down like so many before him, or would he stand his ground? He leaned slightly toward Madeline, his voice low and cold. "Mrs. Crawford, you are right. This is the world of power. But you have forgotten one thing. True power does not lie in a platinum card." Madeline faltered, confusion flickering in her blue eyes. Lena swallowed, caught off guard before she could respond. Christopher sat upright, steady as a volcano building pressure. In his mind he knew it was not yet time to reveal the truth, but that moment was drawing near, very near. The tension hung like a blade suspended in the air. No one pretended to read a newspaper or sip wine anymore. The cabin had fallen silent, broken only by the steady hum of the engines outside. Madeline clutched her Louis Vuitton bag tighter, her voice regaining its haughty edge. "If you refuse to move, I will call the captain. Then we shall see who is right and who is wrong." Christopher tilted his head, a faint smile touching his lips. "An excellent idea. I would also like to speak with the person who has the true authority to decide." The reply, soft as breath, marked the beginning of a storm that would tear away every mask in Aerosky's first-class cabin. The cockpit door swung open, the faint creak of its hinges enough to draw every breath to a halt. Captain Miguel Alvarez appeared, a man in his early 50s with salt and pepper hair and a face weathered by 30 years of transcontinental flights. Each step he took struck the thick carpet like the steady beat of authority. Madeline shot to her feet, as if stepping into a role she had rehearsed her entire life. Her voice rose, dramatic and trembling with false indignation. "Thank God you're here. I am a platinum member. There has been some mistake. This man is sitting in the wrong seat, and I am being harassed." The word harassed dropped into the cabin like a small bomb. A few passengers gasped. Others shook their heads, recognizing the familiar trick, turning oneself into a victim to seize the upper hand. Christopher remained seated, his back straight, his eyes locked on the captain. He didn't need to speak, for his silence alone was a mirror reflecting the cracks in Madeline's performance. Miguel gave her a small nod, then turned to Christopher. His voice was deep, carrying the weight of command. "Sir, may I see your ticket?" Christopher handed him the boarding pass. One quick glance confirmed it. Seat 2A. The truth was plain. But then Miguel's eyes shifted toward Madeline, to the gleam of the platinum card in her hand, and in that instant, Christopher recognized something all too familiar. Authority, choosing the easy path. "Yes, I see this is your seat," Miguel said slowly, striving for neutrality. "However, Mrs. Crawford is a long-standing, loyal customer. Very important to the airline. We can move you to another seat. It is also first class, equally comfortable." The cabin fell silent, not a breath out of place. The suggestion was a replay of countless moments. Travelers of color had endured, legitimate rights brushed aside to preserve the comfort of someone deemed more valuable. Madeline exhaled triumphantly, a smirk tugging at her lips. "There, you see, even the captain understands. You should be reasonable. People like me are always given priority." Christopher did not lash out. Instead, a chill coursed down his spine, sharpening his mind to a razor's edge. He recalled the moments of doubt in Harvard boardrooms, the partners who smiled while their eyes dismissed him as an outsider. All of it converged into this single moment. Slowly, he folded the boarding pass and placed it on the tray table before him. His voice was so calm that it sent a shiver through a few passengers. "Captain Alvarez, may I ask you something? Since when does Aerosky allow one passenger to take another's seat simply because they are familiar faces?" The question sliced through the air like a blade. Miguel hesitated, his eyes flickering with unease. But like so many leaders trained to choose safety, he reached for evasion. "Sir, we only want the flight to proceed smoothly. Sometimes we need flexibility from everyone." Christopher's faint smile carried no joy, only inevitability. He knew in that very moment that every phone in the cabin was recording, that every eye was fixed on him, and that his words would not stay confined within these walls, but would spread far beyond. Tilting his head, his dark eyes shone with unnerving composure. Flexibility or compromise with injustice? Madeline laughed, the sound high and arrogant, though tinged with an unsteady edge. "Oh, come on, don't exaggerate. This is only a seat. Only someone fishing for compensation would make a scene like this." The word compensation made several passengers freeze. Whispers rippled. An elderly black man in row 4 sighed and murmured to his wife, "Same old script." In row 3, journalist Isabella Torres scribbled furiously with her pen, her phone still recording. Beside her, Naomi Chen, a young student, streamed live to hundreds, soon thousands. Christopher felt his heart beat steady, neither racing nor slowing. He knew this was the turning point. He could retreat, letting injustice continue as it had so many times before, or he could stand firm and let the world witness. He leaned forward, his voice low yet carrying across the hushed cabin. "Mrs. Crawford, Captain Alvarez, you both believe I am just an ordinary passenger. But the truth—" He paused, the silence pulling everyone forward, drawn into the weight of what was unsaid. "The truth is, you have no idea who you are dealing with." The cabin erupted in a collective shudder. Eyes widened in disbelief. Shock overlapped with curiosity. And somewhere in that tightly sealed space, a storm was beginning to break. The air was thick, as if every molecule in the first-class cabin was holding its breath. Restless eyes lingered, phones lifted slightly higher, lenses quietly fixed on Christopher. He sat upright, hands clasped together on the tray table, his voice carrying with calm strength. "What do you see when you look at me? A man in a hoodie out of place in this world of silk and leather? Just a random passenger? Or someone stirring trouble to demand compensation?" Each question struck like a gavel against stone, and more than a few passengers flinched, for his words revealed the very thoughts that had flickered through their own minds. Madeline tried to seize back control, her voice sharp and bitter. "You don't need to put on a show. I have flown with Aerosky for over 12 years. I know how this airline treats its passengers. Platinum members like me are always given priority." Christopher turned, his dark eyes piercing straight through the polished veneer of her arrogance. His words dripped slowly, deliberately. Priority or privilege? And is that privilege built on money, on skin color, or on the contempt shown toward those you believe don't belong here? The question struck not only Madeline, but the entire cabin. Some bowed their heads, unable to meet his gaze. An elderly couple nodded, their eyes heavy with understanding. Captain Miguel Alvarez cleared his throat, struggling to maintain control. "Mr. Hale, I understand your frustration, but my duty is to ensure the flight proceeds smoothly. Sometimes we need flexibility to avoid conflict." Christopher laughed softly, but there was no joy in the sound. "Smoothly for whom, Captain? For Mrs. Crawford here, so she can continue believing she has the right to take any seat she desires, or for the airline, so it can avoid facing the truth that its system enables injustice?" Madeline slammed her hand on the armrest, blue eyes flashing with anger and panic. "Enough! I will not be insulted by someone like you. Captain, do something. Call airport security. He is the one causing trouble." The words, "someone like you," cracked through the air like a slap. Several passengers inhaled sharply, as if the sting had landed on them as well. In row 3, veteran journalist Isabella Torres of the Washington Post could no longer stay silent. She rose to her feet, her voice ringing clear. "Excuse me, but I have witnessed everything. Mr. Hale has a valid boarding pass for seat 2A. Mrs. Crawford does not. If anyone is causing trouble here, it is her." The noise subsided, replaced by a growing energy. Someone in the back let out a whistle of agreement. At the same moment, Naomi Chen, the young student, whispered into her phone's camera, "We are witnessing blatant discrimination. The live stream is exploding. Nearly 3,000 viewers now." Chief Flight Attendant Lena Park tried to interject, her voice trembling. "Please, everyone, remain calm. This is just a small seating issue. We can solve it by assigning another seat." Christopher cut her off, his tone low but resonant like thunder. "No, this is not about a seat. It is about respect. If I quietly move today, then tomorrow someone else will be treated the same way, and the cycle will never end." Silence fell. The entire cabin pulled into the gravity of his words. Christopher lowered his voice, yet each word carved itself deep into the minds of those listening. "Mrs. Crawford, Captain Alvarez, Miss Park, you do not know the truth, because I have never spoken it aloud. But today, I will." He pulled his phone from his pocket, the screen lighting up with the logo of Hale Dynamics. A few passengers recognized it instantly, the aerospace technology company that had transformed the industry over the last 3 years. Christopher lifted his gaze, his voice sharp and final. "You are looking at the largest shareholder of Aerosky Airways. 62% of the company belongs to me." The cabin erupted in gasps, whispers, and the frantic clicking of phones raised even higher. Madeline's face drained of color, her lips quivering without words. Captain Miguel froze, his hand tightening around the brim of his cap. Lena Park stood rooted to the spot, her heart pounding, regret rising like a tide. Christopher remained seated, his eyes sweeping across the stunned faces, before delivering his final, chilling warning. "Now ask yourselves, who is it that truly doesn't belong here?" The first-class cabin trembled as if a low-pressure storm had swept through. Phones were raised, trembling in hands desperate to capture each rare second. Murmurs broke out. "Did he just say owner?" "My God, Hale Dynamics. I just read about him last week." "Impossible. That man is the CEO?" Madeline Crawford collapsed into her seat like a cracked marble statue. The carefully painted glamour on her face hardened, drained pale as paper. Her trembling hand clutched the strap of her Louis Vuitton bag, as if clinging to a crumbling illusion. No, that's not true. He's just making it up," she stammered, her voice breaking. But at that moment, Naomi Chen's phone zoomed in on the Hale Dynamics logo, glowing on Christopher's app. More than 6,000 people were now watching live. The comments poured down like a flood. "That's the real CEO. That woman is finished. Aerosky will have to apologize publicly." Captain Miguel Alvarez stepped back, sweat beading on his forehead. He was a man used to tempests in the sky, but never one of dignity exploding within a cabin. His voice rasped. "Mr. Hale, I had no idea. If I had known..." Christopher cut him off instantly, his voice sharp and cold as a blade. "That is the problem, Captain. You always choose the easy way. Whoever looks less powerful gets pushed aside. It never matters who is right." Lena Park stood frozen, her hands clasped at her waist, but shaking visibly. The memory of her own words, suggesting Christopher give up his seat, echoed in her mind like a slap. An elderly man with silver hair spoke slowly. "My son went through the same thing. He bought a first-class ticket, but they forced him into economy. Why? Because he wore a hoodie, just like you." A wave of murmurs swept through the cabin. Cameras no longer pointed only at Christopher, but now turned toward Madeline. She sprang up, blue eyes burning with spite. "You don't understand. I have flown with Aerosky for 12 years. I deserve priority." He's just using this for show." The outburst backfired instantly. Isabella Torres, the seasoned Washington Post reporter, lowered her pen to her notebook, her voice icy. "Mrs. Crawford, I will quote you directly. I deserve more because I am a long-time customer. Are you certain you want that printed on tomorrow's front page?" Madeline's mouth fell open, then snapped shut. Her hands shook violently. Christopher lifted his phone, and with a few swipes the screen lit up. "CEO override. Ground flight." The cabin gasped, some passengers holding their breath. He had not pressed it, but the image alone stunned everyone into silence. His voice rang out, calm yet heavy with authorities no one dared interrupt. "I have the authority to command the entire Aerosky fleet, and believe me, I will not hesitate to use it if necessary." The threat was not loud, but it was sharp, clear, a sword laid against the throat. Naomi Chen whispered into her live stream, "We are watching a CEO ready to issue orders right inside his own aircraft. Viewers are climbing past 10,000. Social media erupted. The hashtag #AeroskyShame began flashing across screens of passengers scrolling through Twitter. Christopher's eyes swept across the cabin, his voice lowering but echoing in every heart. This is not about a seat. This is a mirror reflecting how an entire system treats those it deems unworthy. I have been silent long enough. Today, that silence ends." The cabin fell into stillness. Every gaze fixed on the man in the black hoodie, not as a diminished passenger, but as a mountain rising. At the rear, Miguel Alvarez swallowed hard and turned to Lena Park, his voice shaking. "Call the control tower immediately. We need instructions." And Madeline, her lips quivered soundlessly. Under the dim golden glow of the cabin lights, the mask of false power slipped away. Before everyone's eyes, the truth stood naked. The woman who thought she had everything now had nothing left but humiliation. The crackle of the intercom suddenly echoed through the cabin. The voice of air traffic control rang directly into the captain's headset. "Flight 2292, we have received a CEO override. Confirm immediate return to the gate." First class erupted in shock. Some passengers gaped. Others raised their phones at once to capture the moment. Captain Miguel Alvarez froze, eyes wide with disbelief. In all his years, he had never received such an order, and especially not from the man sitting among the passengers. Madeline Crawford leapt up, her voice shrill and breaking. "No! This is abuse of power! You cannot do this just because of a seat!" But no one was listening to her anymore. The chaos had shifted, and all eyes now fixed on Christopher Hale. He remained composed, calmly swiping across his phone to confirm the command. Seconds later, the overhead announcement filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, this flight will be returning to the gate due to a technical issue. Please fasten your seat belts." A technical issue, a feeble lie. Everyone in first class knew the truth was sitting right in front of them. Miguel Alvarez slowly removed his captain's cap, his hand trembling. His voice faltered as he faced Christopher. "Mr. Hale, I meant no disrespect. I only wanted to keep the flight calm." Christopher cut him off, not harshly, but with sharp finality. "You chose convenience over justice, and a captain who leads through convenience is a greater danger than any storm outside." Miguel's face fell, the weight of decades in the cockpit suddenly heavy as he realized his authority had been stripped bare before every passenger. Lena Park, the chief attendant, whispered as though clinging to her last defense. I was only following habit. I didn't think." Christopher's gaze met hers, not angry but piercing. "You did think. You thought I was the one with less power. And you chose the fastest solution, to push me aside. That is how injustice survives." Lena lowered her head, lips pressed tight. For the first time in her career, her polished shoes felt heavy as stone. Meanwhile, Naomi Chen whispered into her live stream, "Viewers have passed 20,000. We are watching a CEO order his own aircraft to return, right in front of the person who discriminated against him." The comments poured down like a flood. "This is justice in real time. This airline will have to change. I'm crying seeing him refuse to stay silent." Madeline cried out one last time, her voice cracking apart. "I didn't know who you were. I didn't mean to insult the CEO. I only—" Christopher lifted his head, his voice steady but cold as steel. "Exactly. You didn't know who I was. And because you didn't know, you allowed yourself to treat me as less than human. The problem isn't that you failed to recognize me as the CEO. The problem is that you failed to recognize me as a man." The cabin fell silent. Some passengers bowed their heads, others nodded, their eyes glistening. The plane rolled slowly back toward the gate. Outside the window, runway lights flickered like the anxious heartbeat of the cabin itself. Christopher rose, straightening his hoodie, and spoke loud enough for all to hear. "Once we are back on the ground, I will deal directly with the board. Captain Alvarez, Chief Attendant Park, you will be suspended immediately pending investigation. Mrs. Crawford, you will receive a permanent ban from flying with Aerosky." The words were not shouted, but they struck like a final verdict. Miguel Alvarez shut his eyes and exhaled heavily. Lena Park swallowed hard, her eyes wet. Madeline slumped into her seat, shoulders trembling. Christopher turned, his gaze sweeping across the cabin. "Remember this. We do not stay silent in the face of injustice. We do not compromise with contempt. A single airplane cabin may be small, but it reflects an entire society." And as the aircraft came to a complete stop at the gate, every passenger in first class knew this flight would never be remembered for its destination. But for the moment, the sky itself was forced to pause just to hear the truth. The cabin door swung open, and a heavy wave of air rushed in, carrying with it the familiar noise of the terminal. But today, the sound was different. It surged and crashed like roaring waves. Just outside the jet bridge, dozens of camera flashes burst. Shutters clicked in rapid fire. Reporters pressed forward, microphones raised like a forest of spears. News had spread too quickly. Within 30 minutes, the events of Flight 2290 had become the epicenter of global attention. Christopher Hale stepped out in a simple black hoodie, his face calm, but with each step the shouts and the clicking of cameras rose again. "Mr. Hale, is it true you ordered the plane to turn back? Was it because that passenger discriminated against you? How will you deal with Aerosky after this incident?" Questions erupted like a hailstorm, relentless and unyielding. Just behind him, Captain Miguel Alvarez walked with his head bowed, shoulders rigid like a soldier defeated. Chief Attendant Lena Park's eyes brimmed with tears, her trembling hands gripping the aircraft doorframe as if letting go would send her into an abyss. And Madeline Crawford, the woman who had sparked it all, was escorted out by security. Her face was streaked with mascara, her blonde hair disheveled. Boos and jeers broke out from the waiting passengers in the concourse. Some raised their phones, shouting, "That's her! The one who tried to steal the CEO's seat!" Madeline shrank, trying in vain to cover her face, but the cameras closed in like a swarm of bees. Christopher paused in the hallway and turned to face the sea of reporters. He did not hide. His voice was deep, steady, and each word cut sharp as steel. "Yes, I am Christopher Hale, CEO of Hale Dynamics, the corporation that owns 62% of Aerosky Airways. Yes, I used my override authority to force the plane back to the gate. And the reason was not a seat, but a principle. No one is allowed to disregard the dignity of another human being, especially when that person is a customer." The shouts of reporters overlapped, but Christopher raised his hand, and the weight in his eyes silenced them. His voice continued, clearer, heavier with urgency. "What broke my heart was not only the insult from a single passenger, but the way the captain and flight attendant chose the easy way out, asking me, the rightful passenger, to give up my seat in order to protect the comfort of someone with privilege. That is not reconciliation. That is compromise with injustice." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Microphones pushed closer. Cameras zoomed tighter. From behind, Naomi Chen, the young student who had live-streamed it all shouted, "Mr. Hale, more than 50,000 people are watching live. They want to know, what will you change after this?" Christopher turned toward her and gave a small nod. He knew his face and his voice were no longer only in this terminal, but on tens of thousands of screens around the world. "Change," he said slowly, "will begin today. Every crew member involved will be suspended pending investigation. Aerosky will launch a full audit of all discrimination complaints from the past 5 years. And most importantly, we will implement a transparent system where every passenger has the right to report and be heard, no matter what they wear, what they look like, or how much money is in their account." The declaration fell heavy, but it burned bright. Reporter Isabella Torres, who had witnessed everything, extended her microphone toward him, her voice emotional. "Mr. Hale, do you believe this action could change the entire airline industry?" Christopher looked straight into the cameras, a faint smile flickering across his face, proud but weary. "If one of us dares to say enough, then everything can change. Today I just happen to be that person." Cheers erupted from the gathered passengers. Some clapped, others shouted his name. The image of a man in a plain hoodie, yet with the power to shake an airline to its core, spread far beyond the terminal, far beyond borders. And as Christopher walked through the forest of reporters, everyone knew. An earthquake had begun, and it would spread far beyond the skies of Aerosky. The glass doors of the emergency boardroom slammed shut, sealing off the noise of the airport hallway. No more camera flashes, no more cheers. Only a thick, stifling air, heavy with unease. Around the polished long table, the faces of Aerosky Airways' executives had turned to stone. The CFO, the HR director, the COO, all present. On the large screen mounted on the wall, the stock chart bled red, showing nearly a 9% plunge after the news broke. Christopher Hale sat at the head of the table, still in his black hoodie. No tie, no suit. Yet that very simplicity magnified his authority, as if he needed no armor to prove he held every piece on the board. "We can control the narrative," the PR director began nervously. "Issue a press release, apologize publicly, promise to retrain staff. The customers will calm down." "Wrong." Christopher's voice cut sharp, echoing through the room like a gavel striking. "Do you think I turned back a plane just to write an apology? No. I want fundamental change. If not, Aerosky will die, not because of the market, but because of your cowardice." Silence gripped the room. The only sound was the frantic beating of hearts. Christopher rose, striding toward the screen. He pointed at the sea of red, his dark eyes blazing with cold fire. "The market tanked because they don't believe we are fair. They think Aerosky enables discrimination. And they are right." He turned back, his voice lower, yet harder than steel. "I want every discrimination complaint from the past 5 years, all of it made public. I want the entire crew of Flight 2290 suspended immediately. Captain Miguel Alvarez, Chief Attendant Lena Park, and anyone else involved." The HR director paled. "But Mr. Hale, the unions, labor associations will resist." Christopher cut him off again, his gaze sharp as a blade. Then change the rules of the game. Aerosky cannot be a place where unions protect injustice. From this day forward, any employee found guilty of discrimination will be removed. No negotiations. A ripple of unease spread across the table. The CFO tried to interject. But, sir, the costs of compensation, lawsuits, PR campaigns, they will be enormous. We could lose hundreds of millions. Christopher laughed, but the sound sent a chill down every spine. You think I'm worried about a few $100 million? If we don't clean house, Aerosky will lose billions when customers walk away. We don't just sell seats, we sell trust. And today, that trust shattered. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room, piercing through every layer of fear cowering in those around him. Starting next week, Hale Dynamics will implement a transparent discrimination reporting system integrated directly into flight management software. Every complaint will be escalated straight to leadership, bypassing all layers that could bury it. Every case will be documented and made public. Silence ends here. The CTO blinked rapidly, sweat beading on his brow. Mr. Hale, that will overhaul the entire system. It could set a precedent for the entire industry. Christopher nodded slightly. Exactly. And that is my goal. The air grew heavy with awe. Finally, a voice spoke, hoarse, weary, but full of respect. It was the General Counsel, silent until now. Mr. Hale, I've sat in countless crisis rooms. I've never seen a CEO shatter the mirror and force everyone to look straight into it. You may have just saved Aerosky not with apologies, but with truth. Christopher returned to his seat, his voice dropping, deep and sharp. I am not saving Aerosky. I am giving it one last chance to save itself. The boardroom lights cast down across his face, turning the simple hoodie into the robe of a judge. And in that moment, they all understood. The balance of power had shifted. The news exploded overnight. What began as brief airport bulletins had now spread across the globe, and everyone knew the name Christopher Hale. On CNN, a banner scrolled across the screen. CEO Hale Dynamics grounds his own aircraft to fight discrimination. On Twitter, the hashtag #AeroskyShame climbed to the #1 spot worldwide, accompanied by thousands of clips pulled from Naomi Chen's live stream, the calm gaze of Christopher, the pale face of Madeline Crawford, and the moment he declared, "The problem isn't that you didn't know I was the CEO. The problem is that you didn't see me as a human being." In a small cafe in New Orleans, a group of black students watched on their phones, eyes shining. One whispered, "He spoke for all of us. It's the first time I've seen someone with power stand up, right then and there, without waiting until tomorrow." In Chicago, an Asian American family sat together at the dinner table replaying the video. The mother squeezed her daughter's hand. "See, it isn't always about staying silent. Sometimes one no is enough to shake the world." But it wasn't only ordinary people who were stirred. The financial markets were rattled. Aerosky Airways stock continued to fall. But strangely, Hale Dynamics shares surged more than 12% in just 2 days. Analysts commented, "The market sees this as a short-term shock for Aerosky, but a clear signal that Hale Dynamics and its CEO can turn justice into business advantage." Other airlines scrambled, calling emergency meetings. Inside American, Delta, United, the same question echoed. If customers start demanding transparency systems like hail dynamics, what will we do? Christopher himself remained silent. For 3 days, he vanished from the press entirely. But his silence was not retreat. It was preparation. In the high-rise headquarters of Hail Dynamics, the lights burned late into the night. Christopher and his engineers worked frantically to finish a real time discrimination reporting platform. On the screen before him scrolled lines of code, charts, and simulations of the new process. An aide exclaimed, "Sir, you plan to deploy this across the entire system in just 60 days. That's unprecedented in aviation." Christopher only nodded, his voice quiet but resolute. "We're not patching the old system. We're rewriting the rules." Meanwhile, Madeleine Crawford became the target of public outrage. Tabloids plastered her photo with mocking headlines, from platinum member to persona non grata. Every step she took was captured. Every excuse she offered was thrown back at her. No one saw a VIP anymore, only a symbol of arrogance laid bare. On the 4th day after the incident, Christopher reappeared, this time in a packed hall filled with reporters, Aerosky employees, and civil rights advocates. The hoodie was still on his back, but under the lights it had become the uniform of a leader who needed no ceremony. "We have let acts of discrimination survive too long simply because they hid behind labels like loyal customer, keeping the peace, or politeness. But from now on, every passenger of Aerosky, whether in a suit or a hoodie, will share one thing in common: respect." Applause thundered, long and unbroken. Many stood, cheering as if at a campaign rally. That night, in his quiet apartment, Christopher stood alone at the window, gazing out over the glowing city. The noise outside faded, leaving only the sound of his heartbeat. He knew he had crossed a line. From a tech CEO, he had become the unintended symbol of a movement. And from this moment on, every step, every decision would no longer belong solely to him. It would belong to millions who placed their hopes upon him. Christopher smiled faintly and whispered to himself, "Very well. If they need a flag to rally behind, I'll plant it in the sky." The story of Flight 2290 was no longer just an airline incident. It had become a global wave. In Europe, the European Parliament held heated debates. Will our airlines dare to be as transparent as Aerosky? In Africa, a Nairobi news channel broadcast the clip of Christopher Hale confronting Madeleine, the anchor's voice clear and steady. This man was not only defending his seat, he was defending the right to dignity for all of us. In Tokyo, a massive billboard lit up with the words, "Dignity is not optional, Christopher Hale." The technology of Hail Dynamics became the center of attention. Within just 6 weeks, its discrimination reporting system had been piloted across 12 airlines. The first reports confirmed what everyone had long suspected, but no one had dared to expose. Hundreds of cases ignored every single day. The pressure of media, politics, and shareholders forced airlines to bow. A rival CEO admitted bitterly in an interview, "We have no choice. If we don't follow this new standard, we lose customers. Christopher Hale has set the rules, and the entire industry must follow." Meanwhile, Madeleine Crawford vanished from the public eye. Her lawyer released an apology statement, but it was far too late. She had not only lost a confrontation in first class, she had become the symbol of an old era, the era of privilege, of arrogance, hidden behind a VIP membership card. In contrast, the name Christopher Hale appeared everywhere, not as a CEO, but as a flag. Graffiti portraits of him spread across New York, London, Lagos. Children in hoodies called his name while playing in the streets. One evening, at a civil rights conference in Washington, D.C., Christopher stepped onto the stage. No colored lights, no dramatic music, only a microphone and thousands waiting for him. He began with silence. I never set out to be a symbol. I only wanted to sit in the seat that was mine. But when a society forces someone to fight for the right to exist, then every seat becomes a battlefield. Applause erupted, echoing against the marble walls of the hall. He continued, his voice slow but firm. Flight 2292 was only the beginning. From airlines, we will move to hotels, banks, hospitals. Wherever power exists, there must be transparency. Technology is only the tool. What matters is that we refuse to stay silent any longer. In the front row, an elderly woman nodded, her eyes glistening. In the back, Naomi Chen live-streamed the entire speech, the number of viewers surpassing 120,000 in minutes. The next morning, major newspapers ran the headlines. Christopher Hale, the founder of a new standard in service. From one seat to a global revolution for dignity. In his office, Christopher stood quietly, gazing out at the horizon. He knew the storms were far from over. Corporations would resist, interest groups would fight back, and people like Madeline would not disappear overnight. But the sky was different now. For the first time, passengers who had once been silent now had a tool to speak out, and the entire world had seen it. Christopher smiled faintly, remembering that moment in first class when he was just a man in a black hoodie, dismissed as someone who did not belong. Now the whole world knew. He not only belonged, he was redefining what it meant to belong. The final stage was not the first-class cabin, nor the Aerosky boardroom. It was the world outside, where millions of ordinary people listened to the story of Flight 2290 and whispered to themselves, if he could stand up, so can I. Christopher Hale appeared once more before the public, but this time there was no tension in his eyes. On his face was the calm of a man who had walked through the storm, yet still held the compass steady in his hand. His voice was deep and warm as he recounted, I only wanted to sit in my seat. But when Mrs. Crawford denied me that right, she did not only deny me, she denied millions of others. Those deemed unfit for first class. Those told, be flexible, don't make trouble. Those society has grown used to ignoring. Flight 2290 was never just about me. It was about every person who has ever stayed silent. He paused, letting the silence fall, heavy yet sacred. Then he continued, each word as sharp and lasting as if carved in stone. We have allowed silence to last far too long. But that day in first class, I realized silence itself is complicity. I could not stay silent another minute. The hall shook with emotion. Some wiped tears, others clasped hands tightly, and many rose to their feet, chanting his name. Yet Christopher only smiled gently, raising his hand to quiet the crowd. My friends, he said, his voice thick with feeling. I held power because I was the largest shareholder of Aerosky. But you do not need to be a CEO to say, enough. True power begins with each person who dares to speak up for themselves and for others. A young girl, no more than 10, raised her hand from the audience. Her voice trembled, but rang pure. If one day I'm treated unfairly, can I say no like you did? The hall held its breath. Christopher stepped down, crouching to meet her eyes, and answered, You not only can, you must. Because if you stay silent, then those who come after you will face the same. You are the change. The atmosphere erupted. Applause thundered like a storm. Cameras captured the moment. A CEO in a simple hoodie, kneeling to the level of a child, passing the torch to the next generation. And so the circle closed. From a stolen seat, to a seat reclaimed, to millions of seats belonging to everyone. No one would ever again have to prove their worth by skin color, suit, or membership card. Christopher Hale had torn apart the veil of silence. But he did not end the story. He had only written its first chapter.